Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison, and today I have a special solo episode for you packed full of information. If you are listening to this episode and you've been thinking about starting a podcast, this episode is for you because I'm going to give you 10 questions to consider before you even launch your podcast. Now, I know everybody has a different opinion about how they launch their podcasts and what tips and tricks that they've learned, but I'm sharing my tips and tricks with you because I feel like God has led me to talk to you about the process that I went through. So, before I share my screen, before we even get started looking at these questions, as always, I want to open with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak with my listeners and viewers today. Lord, may my words give the viewers and listeners tips and tricks so that they can share the message that you have called them to share with the world and create the content you have called them to create. Lord, thank you for giving me this message. Give me the words and wisdom to say that will not only be pleasing to you, but provide value for the listeners. All this I pray in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. So, before we get started, let me share my screen. Oh, no, that's not right. Okay. Let me see. Okay.
Select a window or an application that you want to share. Share sound checkbox not checked. Sharing options list box. Use star untitled notepad.
Okay.
Notepad. Edit. You have started screen share. Press F6.
All right. So now I have shared my screen. Actually, it makes it easier. So now, before we get started with the questions that I want you to consider, there is one thing I would really like you to, let me get to the top of the document. There we go. There is one thing I'd like for you to think about, and I will expand on this concept next week. But there's one thing I want you to think about, and that is write the vision and make it plain. So before we get started, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause right here, grab a pen and a notebook, if that's what you prefer to use. Open up a document in your favorite word processor on your computer or the notes app on your phone or whatever app you use to take notes, because I want you to journal as we go through these. Because what I want you to do is write your question. As I go through them, I want you to pause and write down your question. And once you get all the questions written, leave some space for you to reflect, because what I want you to do after you write down each question, I want you to write down these questions. I want you to pray over each question, and I want you to consider what God is calling you to do in this moment. Okay. What is God telling you need to do? What is God's answer? As Shay Bynes from Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur and Shelley Hitz from Christian Book Academy and one of the hosts of the Kingdom Writers podcast and one of the hosts of the Kingdom Writers Conference says, this is the time for you to have your business meetings with God. So we're going to go through these questions together, and I'm going to give you some examples of what worked for me and how it worked for me. Okay. So there are 10 questions, and forgive me if this is a bit long, but I'm praying that this information is valuable. And you can pause and come back as you go through this process, okay? So the first question I would like to... Oh, wait, hold on. I'm having some trouble here. Give me just a second.
Star untitled notepad.
There we go. Okay.
Why should I podcast?
Okay. The first question I want you to ask yourself is, why should I podcast? Why do you want to podcast? What message does God have for you to share? And do you want to know why I put this question in the front? Because in the forefront of every other question? Because knowing your why is the first step to launching a podcast, to writing a book, to doing anything creative. Knowing your why is the very first step. It's the foundation. If you don't know your why, then you're going to be spinning your wheels. You're going to be talking about every topic you can think of. It's not all going to make sense. You're going to be all over the place because you don't have a direction, and you're going to be feeling your way as you go. No, if you search your soul, pray and ask God, pray over this question, search your soul, and jot down the reasons, the main reason why you want to podcast. Then you will have a starting point and a very firm foundation to start your podcast. And that's something, even though I didn't go through these questions myself at the time, I did, but not in a reflective way like I'm talking to you today. And I know why I wanted to podcast. And I felt God leading me to podcast because I wanted to share solos like this with you and share the inspirational stories behind the work that the creative authors and entrepreneurs and the people I've had on my show previously and those that are coming up. I wanted to share the story behind their creative work, whether it's writing, puppeteering, writing and recording music, starting a creative business, whatever it took, whatever their journey was. I wanted to share that and showcase the work. Even the marketers and business experts that I've had on the show. Yeah, they had some marketing tips, but they had a story as to what got them started. And that is a huge, huge thing. And God led me to share those stories. So that was my why. Now, the question is, what is your why? Next question number 2. What subject matter is near and dear to my heart? Basically, in one sense, what topic should I talk about? Okay. For me, I'm passionate about writing, Jesus and writing. Okay, let's go there. I'm passionate about Jesus and writing. If you've been with me since I started this podcast in April of 2019, you will know that. Although some of my authors are not necessarily Christian, the authors don't have to be Christian. I just prefer the clean reads. So, clean reads and clean content on my show, as you will know. But a lot of you are writers and authors or even book readers. If you're book lovers and you want a podcast about the books you read, you want to review books, you want to talk to authors and other book lovers about books that they've read and make book recommendations. That's another example. Are you a business expert? Are you a marketing expert? Do you like to talk about sports? Do you like to talk about just the type of business you're running, whatever you're expert, whatever you are an expert in the field of, whatever topic is you're passionate about, that drives you, that brings you joy, use that subject matter to write your podcast. Now, here's the journal prompt for this question. After you ask this question and pray over it, I want you to jot down this is your chance to brainstorm, jot down a list of topics that really bring you joy, that really inspire you. You can talk about, you can do a Christian-based podcast where you take biblical principles and pray and ask God to give you the words to say, to the message to share, and how it applies to your life, or help people apply it to their own lives. If you are in that kind of ministry, whatever the ministry is, whatever you have chosen as your subject matter, brainstorm those ideas, make a list of ideas. And when you do, not only do you have a broad subject matter, but you have a list of ideas for podcast episode topics. Whether you do podcasting alone or whether you do videos like me, you have those basic ideas, and those can change. You can always add to the list and tweak the list as you go and mark off the ones you've talked about. So that is that's another question you need to consider. And I want you to stop and take the time to journal and brainstorm as you pray over them. You don't have to do it now. You write the questions and then you can come back and do that. And also reflect on what you've learned along the way as you go through this process. And even when you launch your podcast, write down what you've learned along the way, because then you can take that knowledge and share it with an up-and-coming podcaster. Okay, question number 3. Do I want to record solo episodes, interview experts in my niche, or both? Okay, that's up to you. That is another question you want to consider, because do you want to do just a solo show where you share your expertise and encouragement and engage with your audience that way? There are some people that do that and are very successful at it. But then there are some people who, and I'm going to be honest about this, I was one when I first started, don't like to hear the sound of their own voice. They want other voices in their podcast. So you want to and God had called me to do this too. So you may want to interview experts. Let's say you're a marketer, for example, or you are a writer and you're a writer, you're an editor or a writing coach, or even a book marketing coach or book coach. Okay. I'm just throwing out some examples. You don't have to take these. You do you. Okay. I'm just giving you examples. You do you, folks. Because whatever works for you and what God has called you to do, that's what you should do. Because I can give you ideas and suggestions, but it's between you and God what you actually do. And what content what subject matter you talk about, what content you create, that's between you and God. Okay. So, and if you have, and if you know some experts in the field, talk to them. Ask them if they want to come on the show and talk about, their marketing strategies, their writing process, their writing tips and tricks, editing tips. You can talk to tips from other editors. You can talk to your clients who've published books and showcase their work and get their stories. There's so many different angles you can go. You can talk to people if you know of writing conferences, and I've heard this is writing conference season. Since you know of writing conferences, you can reach out to the speakers or reach out to the host of the conference to promote the conference, if that's your niche. Whatever God lays on your heart, and he's got people that he wants you to reach out to in order to get the message that he's called you to put out into the world or to share with the world, get that out there, then that's up to you. Or you can do both. Even if you do a podcast where you simply interview authors to promote their stuff, you still want to do a little solo episodes to get to help others get to know who you are. If you want to delve deeper into that side of things, I'm going to recommend a podcast. It's called Book Marketing Mania, that's hosted by Kim Stewart, and she talked about this very thing, gave some tips on how to pitch to podcast hosts to grow your podcast. And there were some tips about your own podcast that I recommend that you listen to. I don't remember the entire list, but I do recommend you go back and you subscribe to that podcast and listen to that, because she's got some really good things that I've learned from. So, but whether you do solos only, interviews only, solos and interviews, that's between you and God. It's up to you, but I want you to brainstorm that. What I want to suggest that you do for the journal prompt after you write the question, and you can reword these questions in your own words. You don't have to copy and paste them, verbatim. Don't think you have to do this verbatim, because this is what's near and dear to you. This is your podcast, your show, your launch. If you don't like the way that I've worded the questions, always go back and reword them to meet your needs, and then change the question as the answers change too, because you may want to, or add more questions, because you may want to do some more reflection. Okay. So, but brainstorm the ideas. Like, okay, so let's say again, your niche is writing, like mine, or you're a book lover. You want to talk to other people who've read the same similar books. You want to talk to authors. You want to talk to, you want to review books with your friends on your show. However you want to do it, that's up to you. That is up to you. But that's between you and God. And once you get really good and started, then your audience may make suggestions. You want to hear some suggestions from your audience, and that's okay too. You can do that. But before you do it, I want you to consider the question before you get started, so that so you have an idea, so that you've laid the foundation built the framework for your podcast, because I did this not in this way, but I did it myself in a different way. I had the podcast plan. I didn't ask. I just started brainstorming some ideas, and then God gave me the rest. And sometimes that happens too, sometimes that happens too. Sometimes God, like with this episode, sometimes God will give you an episode, a solo episode that's totally different from what you had in mind. And you know what? I say go with it, because God knows what he's doing. God has a message for you. Okay? So, next question, I don't even remember what number we are because I didn't number these. I think this was like number 4. What podcast hosting platform should I use? Okay. That one is another thing that's up to you. I'm going to give you a few options. I use Anchor because it's free, and they distribute to the other platforms like Apple, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, whatever you're using. That's what they did that at first. I know you have to enter your RSS feed and do more of that work on your own now, but when I started, they did that. And the app is accessible. But not everybody likes Anchor. That's okay. If you don't want to use Anchor, there's Libsyn, there's Simplecast, Buzzsprout, Podbean, oh gosh, what's another one? Oh my gosh, I can't even think of the other ones now. There's an article that I wrote of course, you won't see they don't use my byline, of course, but there's an article that I wrote, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. It's called 6 Tips for Starting a Podcast, where I shared the links to all of these podcast hosting platforms. Although there are some people out there that have podcasted for years, and they host their own podcasts. They host their podcasts on their own websites, or they create websites just for specific podcasts, and they do that, and then they pay the hosting fees to host on the different platforms. But honestly, I would find a platform. You could probably do it for free. Another one is Pinecast. That's right. Pinecast is the one that American Council of the Blind uses. But you can find one where you can host for free. You may have to pay a small fee to host. It's all on what's in your budget and what features you need. So check out the different hosting sites and write down the pros and cons of each, and then decide. And then, after you've done that, then decide which one works best for you. That is my suggestion there. Okay, the next question: how often should I record an episode? Okay. Actually, we probably should have asked that question before we did the one about the podcasting, the platform, but that's okay. You can write them in any order you want. How long should I record an episode? Okay. So my suggestion, and I've read this when I've done research for podcasting, and I've actually listened to podcasts long before I started recording. So I have heard podcasts as short as 2 minutes, and some as long as, I've even heard that there's one as long as 2.5 hours. But I would not go, well, actually, I did hear one like that, but it was only because 2 episodes were put together, or they had a lot of different people they were interviewing. But I would not recommend that you go that long. I've had a couple of guests where my episodes were an hour and a half, but I always made sure the conversation was engaging and exciting. But normally now, since I've been podcasting for nearly 4 years, April 14th will be 4 years. Can you believe it? I realized that the shorter the episodes, the better. So usually my solos run anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20 minutes, depending on what kind of information I have. And like if I'm reading from the Bible, they may be longer, or if I have information like this, they may be a bit longer. But a lot of times they're short, and I have a short little burst, like a short little book review, or a little tip or something I want to talk about really quickly, and I will do those solos. My interviews, personally, have since those first days of my podcast, my interviews have run for anywhere from 10 minutes to almost an hour. Now, I have had some 40 to 45 minute, maybe even 50-minute interviews, and I've had one that ran just a little over an hour. But again, it depends on how engaging the content is. You don't want to bore your audience. So make sure if you're going to have longer interviews that you keep the people engaged. Or what you may want to do is take those long interviews and break them up into several parts, several segments. That's what I would suggest, okay? But it's up to you. It's however you, it's the time frame that works for you. But I would also be conscientious of, especially if you're having guests, be conscientious of their time too, because they may have other things that they have to do, or an appointment after your interview. So you want to be time conscious. So what my suggestion is, pack as much information in as little time as possible, unless God leads you down a road and it takes you longer. Now, if that's a God thing, that's up to you. And even with the God things, the last couple of interviews have been fairly short because that's just the way it worked out. So the timing is up to you. I would say no more than 15 to 30 minutes. Maybe some interviews may take 40 to 45 minutes, but no longer than an hour. I would say for me, an hour. If you go a little bit, maybe 5 minutes over, that's fine. But an hour is about my cutoff. That's the cutoff for me. But everybody's different. Everybody's different, and you do what works for you. But I would jot down I would do a little test run. Before I even record it. Now, if you're not in a room by yourself, I wouldn't do this. Or maybe you can go into a quiet room and talk through some of your topic ideas. And if you want to record yourself on just a simple, like your phone or something like that, just to run through and time yourself to see how long you run through it, to kind of judge how long your audio or your video is going to be, that's up to you. If that's how you do it, then test it out to see. But that's, you find what works for you. Find what really flows for you. And I don't want to ramble too much because we do have a lot of information to cover, but that was my suggestion on that. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, wait. How long do my episodes need to be? Okay, another question I did not add here, but I want to, on my thing, and I will add it, but I want to add this. How often should I record? Actually, let me type that. Let me find where I am and type that in as we're talking.
How long do my episodes need to be? How often should I record an episode?
Oh, there they are. How often?
How long do my episodes need to be? Should I upload a load? How long do my episodes need to be?
Okay, wait. Where's the... Okay, yeah. I had to look because I wanted to make sure that I was not jumping ahead of myself. And you get to see me look at that in process. Again, I'm authentic. So how often should I record? Okay. That one is probably one you may want to consider. You can do them. You can ask yourself, you can write down the questions in any order you want. Again, but how often should I record? I'm going to be honest. When I first started, I did several episodes in a week. There were times when I did 2 episodes a day. I don't do that now to consider the listeners' times, and being that I'm working on my own books and things, time constraints do not allow that. Plus, I want to keep a consistent schedule. So personally, I do once or twice a week. I will do 3 or 4 in a week, rarely. One, if God has something that he laid on my heart to share and I need to share it quickly. 2, if I'm doing a book launch. If I am doing a book launch episode and helping celebrating a book launch with an author, I will certainly do the episode in the middle of 2-3 episodes a week to get those in. I will put an extra bonus episode, but that's a rare thing. That is not something that I do often. I personally I've started with once a week, but because of book launches and because of, the time sensitivity, like a season, like if your episode is needs to happen in a certain season to promote the book because it's like at Christmas time, or you've got a book launch that happened then. I actually was going to schedule an episode later in the month, but but what I did, and I had to think, that's why I paused. I had to think for a second. What I ended up doing was uploading and airing it that day because the book came out 2 days before. So sometimes it happens that way. But most of the time it started out just on Tuesdays, but now here lately I've been doing Tuesdays and Fridays because this year, as I've said in earlier podcasts, one of my things is walking with God as a writer and a podcaster, obviously. And another one is I want to get more children's book authors because that's what I write. But I'm open to other authors if they're doing book launches and things. I'm open to that too. But children's books are my that's where my heart is right now. And that, I mean, I read some other things for some other Christian related books too. And I like to talk to those authors. So yeah, I do mainly 2 episodes a week, but rarely a bonus. But whatever works for you. I know Kent Sanders, who hosts the Daily Writer, who I've had on the show previously, he does an episode a day, every day. And some of his episodes are like 2 minutes to, I think he had one that was 30 minutes, but he was giving some a lot of information and packing it in a short episode. So he does those short episodes giving a little bit of encouragement and a tip and a challenge or a question. And then he does the longer the interviews, which can run, at various lengths. So, but if you can do that and you can stay consistent with it, then by all means do a daily episode. If you want to do a episode once a week, do that. Once a month, do that. Once every, bi-monthly, do that. But I wouldn't go any further out than once a month because you don't want to lose your audience. You don't want to lose your audience unless something happens and you need to go on a hiatus. Then I would recommend that you do a very quick, like 2 or 3 minute episode, letting people know that you're going on a hiatus. But yet, or you could do like me. You can do like me and record interviews well in advance and schedule several episodes to go out. So you don't have to do like I took last week off because I was at a training. I took this week off from well, as you're hearing this. Okay, let me record that because I'm recording on my birthday, which is March 10th, which is Friday. But actually, you'll hear this on the 14th, which is this coming Tuesday. So as you're hearing this today, I took 2 weeks off of interviews. One, because I was in a job search study training with the National Research and Training Center on Blindness and Low Vision. I did that training and the study and met some new people and all that good stuff. And then this past week, because I needed to take a mental break and catch up on some writing stuff. So, but just because I took that time off, and I don't have any interviews scheduled for this coming week either to record. But just because I took that time off does not mean that I didn't have episodes. Oh no, I have episodes scheduled. I had some episodes scheduled all the way out to the end of the month. Some, but not a whole lot. And then I've got some other things planned too. So I've got episodes coming up. that are scheduled to go out in advance. Some that are coming up in the near future. It all depends on how my schedule works. And now that I've learned how to automate that, upload after I do the interview or after I do the solo, upload it and schedule it, then I don't have to upload on the day. Oh, I'm gonna air it on this day. I've got to upload. No, I'm airing it on such and such day. Schedule it, even scheduling on YouTube. Basically, set it and forget it until the day. And then it only takes about maybe 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how much is going on, or, how much is flowing through your brain, how much is going on. You can just set it, you can share that out 10 to 20 minutes, post your show notes on your site, share it in your newsletter, share it with the person you've interviewed, especially if it's an interview, if it's an episode, if you're interviewing an author, share that send the links to that person and ask them to share it on their sites, tag them on social. It may take only a few minutes to share the episode, and then you're done. And then you go on and do your other tasks until the next episode comes up, or until your meeting is scheduled, or until you God gives you a solo to do, or you've got a calendar. Okay, I want to do a solo on this date. Some people even go that way. Some people create a spreadsheet. It just depends on what works for you. You do you, but these are suggestions that I'm throwing out. You have to figure out the schedule that works best for you. Look at your calendar. Always keep a calendar. I use Google Calendar. You can use the calendar on iOS. You can use Outlook. You can use whatever calendar works for. There are so many. You can even, and I have a link to one, but I don't use it. But you can use Calendly and have guests schedule the meetings on your calendar. Because if you got a lot of events going on, you can use Calendly to set that up, and all they have to do is go to your link and schedule a time on your calendar. And that's, there are so many different calendar apps and things out there, but use the calendar that works for you, and always keep a schedule. If you have something going on a certain day, then make sure you can schedule it. You have to figure out the schedule that works for you, but jot down some ideas. Okay, so I'm doing this, and maybe keep track of what your schedule looks like, so that you know in advance how many episodes you want to batch. Even if you have to take a vacation or take some time off, you can batch the episodes. Like, I took off at the end of 2023. I took off most of the month of December from interviews, simply because I needed a break. I had done a lot of interviews last year, and quite a few. I mean, not like hundreds, but some 2 a week at least, sometimes 3, depending on what type of interview I needed to do. If whether it's an author interview and I had to read the book, or it was an interview for like Ramon Ray, who talked about marketing for authors, people like that. But I did that. I took the end of the year, that month off, but that didn't mean that you didn't get a podcast. Because the interviews that I did for that month, I had scheduled out through the month. So the podcast still ran seamlessly, whether I was recording interviews or not. I made sure of that. And I love having that feature, that automation, so that I can just set it and forget it until the day it happens. And then once it happens, then I'm off sharing it, and then going on to the next task, recording a podcast, writing some, whatever. But that's all I'm saying. Put together figure out what schedule works for you. Brainstorm. This is where your brainstorming session comes in. I'm giving you suggestions. You figure, you do what works for you. So let's move on to the next episode. I'm reading. Let's move on to the next question before I randle even more. Should I upload a logo and other images to my podcast feed? Yes. I am totally blind, and I even understand the importance of uploading images. When I did the research for my 6 tips to launch a podcast blog article, I learned a lot. If you want people to find your podcast, you want to attract listeners to your podcast, my suggestion is have a logo. Whether you have the artistic talent, or you have an eye for graphic design, create your own logo. You can, I ask a friend to create it using Canva. You can do that. You can hire somebody to do it, or depending on the podcasting app, the podcast hosting site that you use, you can use one of their free image logos with the hosting site's brand on it. I did that for Anchor when I first started. But then you have to give the artist credit for the photo. You have to put the little copyright such and such by or cover art provided by so and so on. I don't remember the person's name. But you'd have to say, and this is just, I'm throwing out something here, but cover art provided by Joe Schmo from Unsplash.com, or it would give you a link, Unsplash Pixels, Pixabay, whatever stock photo site you get it from, you do need to give that person credit and have a copyright. And that's just, that's just common. That's not only legal, but it's common courtesy too, because they put their hard work in there. They want credit for it. But if you have a friend do your logo for you, you don't have to do that because it's yours. Because you are the one who tells the person what you want. Or, for a blind person, you describe what your vision is for the cover. You may not know your favorite color, but you don't know what colors look best. But that's when especially even if you're hiring somebody, that's when you have somebody, a backup, a trusted friend, look it over and tell you, okay, this looks good, or get 2 or 3 mock-ups. And you can talk to podcast hosts, publishers, whatever, to learn more about mock-ups. I mean, Jen Lowry writes, if you go to the Jen Lowry Writes podcast, if you go back several episodes, she talked about different mock-ups for covers. But look at a couple or 3 different mock-ups and get somebody to describe them. Look them over, and even if you want other opinions, put them out there on social media and do a which one do you like better post. That's something you can do. So there are so many options, but yes, I would have visuals. But what I do for guest interviews, when I have guests come onto the show, I ask them to send me pictures, headshots, or if they've been on the show before, they can send me their book cover, and I just upload that as episode art. Or from what I've been told by other sighted folks and a couple of people with a little bit more vision than I have, if you don't have a cover photo, then your logo serves as your episode art. And that may be true. I mean, if somebody doesn't really, if somebody wants to fact check me on that and comment on it or email me, then please do so. Because I do want to know, how relevant that is and how true that is, because I don't want to give people the wrong information. But if that is the case, then please let me know. Whether you comment on this video after you go to the podcast feed, you leave me a voice message, you can comment on my socials, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, because I do put it on Pinterest, but mostly Twitter, Facebook, or you can email me at annwrites75@gmail.com. That's ANNWRITES75@gmail.com. My social media is listed at the top of my YouTube channel page. It's also listed on, if you go to Anchor, you should see it there. If you go to the Anchor site, you should see it there. You probably see it on the other podcasting apps too. But yeah, so I do want to find out for sure if that's the case, because if it is, then that, if that's what you want to use, that's fine. But for guests, I have asked them to send me JPEG or PNG pictures, and when they do that, then I can upload their picture, and their image becomes the episode art, not the podcast cover art, but the episode art for the podcast. That way people can see the person's face before they listen to the episode. Okay, so that's my that is my that is my take on photos. What platform should I use to record my episodes? Well, okay, that's up to you too. That depends on what works for you. When I started, I was using Anchor and using my mic on my iPhone. That was what I started with. I can still do that. Every once in a while I might still do that if I think of something that I need to talk about really quick and I'm like outside in my swing or something like that. But most of the time what I do is I use Zoom, like I'm doing now, to record the audio video episodes for the podcast. That's what I do, and I have this headset that you see here. I've also had a Logitech headset, and we'll get to that in a minute, but some people use their internal mics, especially I've heard some guests use those, but that's up to you. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you can use Zoom, which I do. But now I've actually been on a podcast with a guest who uses, with a host who uses a platform called Squadcast. You can do, it's like you can see each other because he could see me. It you can talk via video, but it only records the audio. So if that's what you want to do and you don't want to do YouTube, you could go with Squadcast, check the accessibility of it. As a guest, it was fairly accessible for me, but do check the accessibility because you want to make sure that your platform is going to be usable. I found Zoom to be very accessible. There's another video conferencing site out there that's very similar to Zoom, and I've only used it once because I was invited to join an ACA business club meeting. Don't ask me what ACA stands for. If you want to look that up, do Google it. And if you're interested in that, but it was called, when I bring that up because it's called Ring Central Meetings. And if I'm not mistaken, you can sign up and do your own free video conferencing there, but I don't know the specifics. But what I do know is that Ring Central Meetings, their setup is if you go to one of their meetings, you do have to download the client and then you get the link and it opens it. But it's set up very similar to Zoom as far as your meeting controls, whether you're on the guest side. I haven't seen the hosting side, but on the guest side and all that kind of stuff, your meeting controls and all that set up differently. Not differently. It's set up very similar to Zoom. Though some people use streaming services or streaming platforms like StreamYard. My friend Tish uses Ecamm. Some people use Restream. There's another one called Blue Jeans. There's several different platforms out there. Or if you just want to do audio, you can use Audacity. You could use different there's an MP3 recorder thing out there that you can use. There are so many different platforms to use. You have to test them out, go look at the different ones, test them out, and find what works for you. And then write down your reflection, why it works, why it doesn't work. So that way you can make an informed decision. I can't tell you which one to use. I tell you what I use and what works for me, but I can't tell you which one you use. Okay? You have to make that decision for yourself, but I would brainstorm and look at the different options, do some research, and then find the one that works for you. And then also test them. Do test record. You don't have to upload those anywhere, but you can do test recordings on each platform to see which one sounds better, which one is user friendly, and if you decide you want to pay for the service, like I pay for Zoom every month. If you want to pay for that service, you have to find out which one fits your budget too. So those are some avenues that you can take to go and research that. Okay, so what type of recording equipment should I use? Now, the types of microphones you use there's many microphones out there. There are probably more microphones out there than there are recording conferencing software. But like I said, I use this headset here. I'm not sure of the brand, but I do know that it's not necessarily Logitech, but it is a USB headset. Logitech is very popular. And I know because I'm a member of the American Council of the Blind, and I've been on their community calls, and I'm into other calls, and a lot of and that's a very popular headset in the blind community, and in other writing other conference calls, because other people use those really good headsets too. You got Logitech. You have even if I've looked at the brand, I couldn't even pronounce the name of it. It has it written on the back. I got this particular headset because I like the fact that it had a bag that like this. Let me turn it around. I don't know if you can see the name there. I couldn't get my fingers off of it. Don't know if you can see the name of it. I'll turn it this way too, just so you can look at both sides. But Yeah, I like that soft protective bag that it's in. But and it was at a very fairly decent price, and I had a Logitech that, yeah, did not work for me. I mean, well, the mic quit working after a while. So when that happens, you just find something else that works, or you get another headset with the same brand. You find what works for you, and then you stick with it. But there are there are a lot different mics. You can get headsets like this one. You can get a desk model mic with a pop filter, which it probably wouldn't hurt for me to get a pop filter for this one too. But you get a pop filter to get like the boom mic, and I've talked to some podcasters who actually have I think it's a Castro Pro. I don't remember the name of it. Don't quote me on that. Do some research. But some people have these really fancy podcasting mixer boards that have like the music the music you can sample in, you can add music and stuff like that. But they do have these really good boom mics, and the mics can get expensive too. So it all depends on what you prefer, your personal preference and your budget, and what has the best audio quality. When you purchase a mic, test it. Do a test recording to make sure it's something that has really good audio, because you want your listeners to be able to hear you. So you want good audio. Therefore, when I first started on Zoom, I was using the internal mic on my computer for a while. And then when my Logitech headset gave out, and my earbuds I was using that I'd gotten from the iPhone, when the mic shorted out on those, I was using the internal mic on my computer until I got this headset, which I got like almost a year ago. So it's the preference. Use what works for you that has good sound quality, but doesn't, but good sound quality, but fits your budget. That's what I'm trying to say. So those are my suggestions there. Now, last question, is there anything else I need to know before I record my first episode? Now, this is going to be short and sweet, because this is a reflection question. If you have other questions that you want to talk to other podcasters, you have other questions you need to ask yourself. Not just yourself, or you have other questions that you want to ask other people who podcast, maybe in your niche, maybe veteran podcasters, that probably have done it longer than I have, because there are people that have done it since back when podcasting first started. I mean, I'm still learning. I mean, I've learned a lot, but I still got a lot to learn myself. But if there's any extra questions that you have that you can jot down in your journal, that way when you're talking to somebody who is a veteran podcaster, you can actually work with them to ask the questions that you need to ask. And then I would put down your reflections. What are my reflections from pre-planning to launch? And I would also add places in your journal for reflection. So those are the 10 questions that I had. You can rearrange them, organize them, rewrite them, everything. But what I want you to do is write these questions down, pray over them, and then write the vision and make it plain. That is taken from Habakkuk 2, verse 2. I will expand on that in next week's episode, but for now, I want to leave you with that. So, let me stop my screen share. There we go. Because we're going to actually close out this episode with a prayer. And before I do, I just want to say, if you find this information valuable, share it with a friend. Follow the podcast, leave a rating and review. But the best thing you can do is share it with a friend. Okay? Because you may have a podcasting friend that is just beginning and wants to know the process from start to finish. I mean, well, from start to present, from start to where I am, because I'm definitely not finished. No. And even if you don't get the if you ask questions, you have further questions after this, and you want to ask somebody who's been in it longer, that's fine. You find the person you're most comfortable talking with. But do not hesitate to ask questions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to close this out in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the words that you have given me to say to these listeners and viewers, Lord. May they be pleasing unto you. May the listeners and viewers find value in what I've said and build their frameworks for their podcast and put their plan into action. All these things I pray in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. So thank you for joining me on Inspirational Journeys. I know this has been a bit longer than usual, but I hope and pray that this information has been helpful to you. You can always stop and come back if you need to journal this information and take it one question at a time. Or if you want to write the questions down, you can do that and journal about it as you go. But thank you for joining me. Thanks for joining me on Inspirational Journeys today. And I want to leave you with my challenge. I challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspirational, create the content that God has given you, and share your creation and your content with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks again for joining me. May this information be valuable to you. And remember, your story matters. So go out and share the message God has given you with the world. Thanks again, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. I will see you hopefully on Friday, because I've invited Jen Lowry to come back and talk about her new book, Best Buddies Book Club. But if you don't see me on Friday, then I will see you on Tuesday with the episode titled Write the Vision and Make It Plain. So do stay tuned, because I always have new episodes coming up. And don't forget to if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell and share the videos and tag me so that I can share your content. Like on Twitter, retweet it. Share your post on my Facebook. Whatever, just tag me. And I will be happy to share if I can at all possible. So thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for joining me. And as always, have a blessed day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.